Hello, everybody, and welcome to Short Fuse. I'm Duncan Roberts, and I'm here with my lovely, lovely colleague and friend, Oliver O'Donoghue. Say hi, Ollie.
Hi, Duncan, and may I say that was a lovely thing for you to say.
I know, I do. I'm a nice person. Aren't you?
You're also fine.
Okay. Right, I'm going to pass over to you to tell everybody what we're talking about today, because I do it all the time, and I'm a bit bored of doing it, so go for it.
Gratefully received your responsibility. Today, we'll be digging into our tech tracker, Duncan, our tech tracker, and exploring the findings of our latest technology review covering October. Exciting stuff ahead.
Indeed. So we'll go through some of the technology trends and their trajectories. Maybe we'll just touch on the biggest movers, shall we?
Yeah, I think so. There's a lot of bumping around in this one. I think in the September one, everyone went kind of south. So confidence dropped on more or less across the board, and there was that big theme we could talk about. There's less of a joint theme across all of these this time around. Some are up, some are down, some are left, some are right. So yeah, we could talk about the biggest movers. There are a few that have jumped quite significantly.
There's some really big movers this month, actually. So a lot to tuck into. And we'll also, towards the end of the podcast, we'll just go into some of the biggest stories that we're seeing in our Discover area, some of the big themes that are either growing in discussion in our data sources, or that are kind of just bubbling up anew. So why don't we look at the first big mover? And it's one of your favorites, Ollie. It's cloud. And bearing in mind that when we talk about cloud, we're really talking about that kind of next generation infrastructure and lots of sub-themes that all go to make up cloud, things like data centers, edge computing, all of those different things. So tell us what's happened to it. And on the YouTube video, I'm going to pop up a little animation to show you exactly what it's doing in our trajectory tracker.
High production value. We expect and deliver nothing less. So yeah, cloud. I'm sad to say, because for all of our loyal listeners, know I'm a big fan of cloud, covering it for about 10 years, and I was very happy to see it at times the only technology in the momentum zone. But bad news, it's dropped massively, both public perception, I suppose, rather than consumer perception. Public perception and builder conviction have dropped, and it's now stuck wallowing in the hype trap. And the biggest reason for that, I think, if we trawl through all of the data, is the big AWS outage that I think, I guess most people have heard of, brought down huge chunks of the internet. If you were trying to Snapchat or Roblox, or even Fortnite,
is to Roblox a verb? I'm Robloxing.
It's now.
Yeah,
it's now. Yeah, if you were Fortniting, there would have been a brief period of time when you couldn't Fortnite. And that annoyed everyone, including the builders. So from the public perception point, that was obviously the immediate concern, like, oh, well, the internet's broken, and it's wild to us that a single data center, which is effectively what had happened, I think, breaking down in the US meant that all of these systems, applications, websites across the globe, including some pretty important ones like banks, were offline. That's wild. And the experts joined in that chorus, which is, hey, it's crazy to think that there is one company that forms the bedrock of most of the internet, which is sort of true. And then you have the competing point in a lot of the analysis, and you can see this in the report that we published, where people saying, well, what choice do you have? Because even Microsoft and Google, they're probably the biggest. Well, I say probably, they definitely are the biggest, but they're still nowhere near AWS's scale. So it's not like you could jump from one to the other.
And it doesn't problem. It doesn't really solve a problem, because they can still have their issues and take down the rest of the half of the internet. Do you know what I mean?
Right. In the olden days, and this is where my decade of falling in and out of love with cloud. In the olden days, people would genuinely just all be in one bucket. And there were some regulations that had to come in for things like banks, where you had to have multi-cloud. So you had to have some of your core applications in other buckets like Microsoft or Google. But even if you did that, a big outage would still knock you out. It would still give you problems. I think that's the case now. A lot of these companies aren't new to the digital economy. It's not a surprise to them how to manage infrastructure. And I think if it's a big enough outage, what can you do?
I think, but then there was also the Cloudflare outage, wasn't there, that brought down even more of the internet when that happened. It just points to the fact that even though there is a kind of a choice of suppliers. It's very limited. And even if you choose one supplier for one thing and another for another, one of them will go down and it kind of just breaks everything anyway.
Yeah, I think at the scale a lot of these companies, that popular companies like these operate at, you don't have actually as much choice as you would think. You could draw up a list of 20 cloud providers, but most of them wouldn't be able to deliver at the scale that these companies need.
Does it seem to be happening more and more these days? Or is it me? This is just a personal kind of reflection that something I use Down Detector a lot. And just when I'm having trouble getting onto a website, go to Down Detector to see what's going on. And I seem to be going there all the time at the moment.
I wonder if we're just less tolerant.
Yeah.
I think, back in the, not to give away our ages, Duncan, but we were in the really sketchy days of the internet when we were
me
down
a lot more before you.
Up. Well, quite. I joined just when you had to unplug the phone if you wanted to go online and vice versa. So I
remember getting our first internet connection. I'm not going to tell you what I Googled on it. Well, I didn't Google. I Alta Vista'd.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I'm not going to tell you what that was when I was like, I don't know, 13 years old or something like that. But anyway, yeah, it is a tolerance thing, isn't it? And that's not going to be, it's not going to be getting any better.
Well, and what Down Detector shows, because I also go on Down Detector, because the second it's down, I'm outraged. I how dare this be down? For more than 2 seconds. And what if you were to go to Down Detector when something isn't down, you'd find it's down somewhere. And I think that's the thing. It's kind of almost like a rolling blackout for some applications. They're down somewhere because the technology that underpins it is now so complex. Keeping it all up all the time is very difficult. But just to roll on with why cloud's probably gone south as well, I think there is still, and we've done a few pieces on this and a few podcasts on this about the AI bubble.
I know where this is going.
Cloud's caught up in it, right? And I think we talk about this a lot, Duncan. There are a lot of news articles that the public are responding to where we're talking about trillions of dollars of investment that obviously hits some of the infrastructure firms. In fact, the big infrastructure firms that we've mentioned are the ones saying some of these big numbers. And it's just getting more and more fanciful, it seems. I don't want to say anything about Sam Altman, but he did do a very, very interesting interview that me and Duncan found very funny, and we're talking about where he faced quite minor criticism. In fact, not even very minor criticism. It was just like an honest question.
It's a question that everybody should be asking, though, as well, and everybody is asking.
Yeah, I think if you can't answer that question, then we're all in real trouble. And he couldn't. Well, his response was, if I'm correct, saying, sell your stock if you're worried. Much of a problem, which I think is genius move.
But it's just a question of revenue. Like, where is, like, for the amount of money that is being committed, where's the revenue coming from, and what is your revenue? And there's no answer to it at the moment.
Yeah, across the board, almost. We're talking, someone's going to have to pay this. So the end consumer, the enterprise, wherever it is that's the end customer, will eventually have to pay for all of this. Otherwise, the whole model breaks down. And it's very difficult to see where trillions and trillions of dollars are going to come from.
And I think that there's a bit of skepticism. So we see generative AI itself, which includes subterms around OpenAI, Gemini, Anthropic, and Claude, and things like that. Now, really, everybody's just down on it. The press is talking about it only in negative terms, as well as the builders really talking about it in negative terms. And cloud is following it because a bunch of that negativity is wrapped up in these infrastructure deals that seem to be trillions and trillions of dollars passing between everybody. I had an observation that connects with one of the other technologies on the technology tracker, which is XR. And it was just a really interesting observation for me. There's an analyst stroke influencer who I follow called Sadly It's Bradley. And he does a lot of stuff on XR and XR headsets. And he publishes a lot of leaks on new XR headsets that are coming out, what the technology they're using. And it's really insightful, interesting stuff. A lot of the stuff he's been focusing on at the moment is around Valve's new headset, nominally called the Steam Frame. And there have been a bunch of updates to other headsets and new headsets released recently. So there's been an update to the Apple Vision Pro, that's put an M5 chip in it and slightly tweaked the headband. There's been the Samsung Galaxy XR headset released, both well received, and we can see that because XR is moving. It's still in the hype trap, but it's moving gradually up towards the momentum zone, because there's been some new products released and they've been relatively warmly received, and generally the technology is starting to get to a point where some of those early promises can be delivered upon. However, Brad released an image leak of a Steam controller on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, just a day or so ago. And usually that stuff would be met with unbelievable positivity. Wow, this looks great. Like whatever it was, it would generate loads of discussion. But what he did was he took the image that he had of it and passed it through some AI and posted an AI generated version of it. The reason being is he must have had a blurry photo of it. The photo might have revealed who the leaker was or whatever. So he put it through AI and released an AI generated version of it. You would not believe the amount of comments that he just got saying, why are you releasing AI slop versions of this hardware? Like, what is this AI slop? Why is this AI slop? Like, there was less focus on really interesting leaks, really interesting hardware. Like it looks weird. It's kind of like a Steam Deck without the screen. But no, it was all like, is this AI? Is this AI slop? Why does it look so uniform? So even the hype around new technologies that are really cool, if it's got a sniff of AI about it, there's just this massive negative wave of people going, well, this looks like AI. You're lazy. And it's just so interesting to me that positivity can be completely negated by that attitude.
It's telling though, isn't it? It's telling because it feels like, particularly over the last 2 or 3 months, we've hit this kind of trough of social inertia where, and I would say the slop's better than it ever has been. I mean, the slop was really bad a year ago and everyone was like, oh, it's really funny. We're putting pictures of themselves as packaged action men or whatever it was. You can remember that phase? There are all these, strange, these strange kind of influencer trends that everyone was doing it. But it's the last 3 months where everyone's kind of gone like, oh, I'm actually going to fight back against this. I don't like it, regardless of context. So the context you've described, which is a legitimate reason to use it, presumably very well explained, and everyone's default reaction was, well, this is bad because it's AI. It must be. It can only be bad that you've used AI for this. I think that's really telling about where we are. And again, you noted it. So generative AI being different from AI in the way that we record it. So AI is doing well. In fact, AI has now snuck, I believe,
into the
momentum zone.
Yeah.
Right. So people are talking about all of the good applications of AI in the both public and builder spheres, whereas generative AI is going backwards and backwards, particularly from a public perception. And we do have that podcast that we've done where we do a deep dive in this, but a lot of the negative connotations associated with generative AI, less so AI, is slop, which you've mentioned, but also layoffs and perhaps almost smoke screen layoffs, which are getting even more of a negative reaction.
Yeah, and the slop is just unbelievable at the moment. I mean, if you are producing content on the internet that says, in the rapidly evolving landscape, if you've got it's not about, it's about, and if you're using the word shift all the time, then stop. Because
you should be able to say shift, I think.
But like,
you're
honestly,
one or two.
You're allowed one or two, but honestly, it's just absurd at the moment. And I mean, just as somebody who reads a lot on the internet, as soon as you see it, you just switch off. And I think like the sadly it's Bradley thing with something that I'm super interested in, I genuinely believe is valid content. It's just so indicative that as soon as AI gets involved, people are just turning off. And that's not great for the technology. We should also mention that in our determination that generative AI really includes things, as I mentioned, like the company names, the OpenAI, the Anthropics, Google Gemini, whereas AI is more about the techniques like deep learning, machine learning and stuff like that. So the techniques and the technology itself is very positive. It's the businesses around AI that are causing all the skepticism at the moment. The technology itself is great. There are issues with it, of course, but it's the businesses and the way in which it's being used, which is the problem right now.
Well, and I thought it was interesting before we bounce to another technology that when we did our deep dive on AI layoffs, we ventured a theory that a lot of the perceived economic damage and damage to employability isn't necessarily because of AI, and in fact, there are a range of other factors, and AI is just being cited. And in different circles, we've got a little bit of pushback on that. So people are saying kind of, oh, you're misguided. It's AI. It's this big revolution we're facing, everything like that. The Economist, I think yesterday, published a deep dive, very similar deep dive, where they came to the exact same conclusion. So they said, look, AI probably isn't the reason you're struggling to find a job. There's tariffs, there's economic recession, there's all of these other factors. So I think, again, that more nuanced understanding of what's going out there might mean people are less hostile, but the part, certainly not. Because, and I wonder if that's what makes it more like the feeling more acute, because you're being told, okay, AI is going to come in, it's going to do your job. And then you can go on LinkedIn or X or whatever and see what AI is capable of doing and be like, oh, what?
Yeah, but that's the thing. It's like
an idiot.
It's just such a surface level indicator of what AI's capability is. It's like the lowest common denominator of what AI can do is what everybody is seeing out there. And it's just driving negative sentiment. And it's a real shame, I think, that it's been released. Maybe it's because it was released as like a consumer product before it was released as an enterprise product that it's got this negativity around it because of the shallow pool of uses that it's going through.
Should we bounce to the next one? Our high flyer.
Yes.
Nanotechnology, right? So if you're following along, nanotechnology almost off the scales in its conviction score. Builders love it.
Bump right up. I mean, I know very little about nanotechnology, I have to admit. We've got it there because it is an interesting emerging technology, but I need to do a bit more research. But Ollie, you've done a bit of reading on why that might be and written it on your blog.
I think this is an interesting technology here because I'm the same as you. It doesn't come up in conversation as much as AI, quantum, even, which is why it doesn't score very well on a momentum score. So it's not, it doesn't have a very strong momentum score. So the public aren't talking about it and aren't talking about it in a positive way. But builders, as of this month, have almost tripled their position, moving it right to the top. And a big part of that seems to be in the life sciences space. There are a lot of very successful uses of nanotechnology as of this month that have been reported on, including the ability to almost do very precise therapies for things like oncology. So a lot of studies coming out saying, hey, we used nanotechnology, which enabled us to treat this. And I think there was something like 2,000 times more effective treatment as a result. So people in the know who are using this technology in their day-to-day lives, the builders, rate it incredibly highly. Whether or not it holds that position, who can say? Because it is just a flurry of very positive scientific results that are keeping it there. Whether or not it keeps the discussion going, I couldn't say. But I do wonder whether or not it'll ever be picked up in the public in the same way that things like AI are, because it's not something that we would go out and use.
It just doesn't have to, does it? It just doesn't have to.
No, it's not what it's for, I suppose.
Yeah. It's not like unless we start getting cyberpunk type nano bots flowing around our veins that give us extra special superpowers, which I think might be a few years off. It's just not something that needs a lot of public high sentiment and momentum to succeed. As long as the people who are using it and the scientific output is strong, then it's succeeding. And I think it's a good kind of delineation to make between these technologies. It doesn't have to be in the momentum zone to really be succeeding.
Yeah, it's a hidden gem, Duncan. It's a hidden gem from the public. It's beavering away in the background. The example you gave reminds me of when I watched Futurama as a kid, and there's an episode where Fry gets worms, and they make him really buff, jazzercise his muscles, make him really clever, and I really wanted that. So if there's, rather than having to infect myself with some kind of space worm, I'd much rather it was a little bot that did that for me.
Yeah, that would be nice. Have an injection and be able to see through walls or something. That'd be nice.
No, I care less about that.
Well,
I like my walls where they are.
I just sound like a creep now.
Yeah, correct. That's exactly what you sound like.
But actually, as I say that, my brain's just going a little bit, and it is interesting if it stays in hidden gems, because as soon as it gets a kind of a public use case around it, like especially if it's in the medical field, if the public momentum is low, then much like we see with vaccines, for instance, and different medical treatments, it could suffer from that, actually. Mm-hmm. So slightly kind of reverting on my previous comment, it could suffer if for some reason there is a cure for a degenerative disease or for cancer or something like that involves nanotechnology. And if public sentiment is low, the uptake of that or the blowback from it could be severe if it doesn't work its way into the momentum zone. So there is some importance to it there, I guess.
Yeah, there's the positive side too. So I guess if members of the public think, okay, well, this is a cure that I wouldn't have had access to, that's probably a good thing. I would put it, however, in the camp of it's really complicated, and as a result, most people aren't going to want to talk about it. And I'll give you a quote. This is from the Northwestern University team who did this study and were able to make something more productive. Here's what they did. They employed spherical nucleic acids. I don't know what that means at all.
I've got is that acid in a ball of some sort?
Yeah, spherical. They threw spherical acids at the issue. But and the reason I mention that is because our next big technology, I think, suffers from this too.
Which is going with this too.
Oh, I know. Well, so for the listener, me and Duncan talked for about an hour before this podcast, where I was like, I don't really want to talk about quantum because I don't really understand it. And Duncan tried to convince me that that's still noteworthy and still worth talking about. And I think you probably understand it a little bit more than I do. But that, for me, represents something perhaps more noteworthy, which is that people just don't understand what this technology does, what it could be applied to. I spent in the run-up to this listening to an ungodly amount of quantum computing podcasts and reading articles, and I would suggest that there are probably, let's say of the 7 podcasts I listened to, 6.5 of them didn't really seem to know what they were talking about at all. So they were saying all of the right words in the right. They're saying
make that 7.
Well, quite, yeah, exactly. Now we're adding our name to the list. But I would, like I said, I would question what that means. There's a really interesting conversation that me and Duncan had, which was the interdependency of quantum and AI just before this. Mm-hmm. And in our research, Duncan went off and did some research to find out the positive side of the story, and I obviously went off to find the negative side of the story. And the one compelling thing I saw was, well, I thought it was very amusing, was quantum and AI combined is good for one reason only, and that's if you name your company that, you'll find it much easier to get funding. That's probably true. That's probably true. So we do both things.
Maybe we should rename this podcast Quantum AI Short Fuse #blockchain and see if we can get some more listeners. Yeah, we'll change it based on what's in the momentum zone at the time. Yeah. But it was an interesting conversation. I think we must absolutely do an episode where we make our bets on quantum, because I think there's going to be similarity, but probably for different reasons, which is the case a lot of the time. But I do think that there's value in exploring how something like quantum can be used in combination with AI or to help with AI development. And drug discovery and trading and all those different things. I just think it's quite narrow and it's a long way off. It's just, you've got in the report why you think quantum's moved into the momentum zone recently. Do you think it's valid? So conviction is a bit lower than momentum, but it's quite close to the middle. It's not like it's shot into the momentum zone drastically, so it could move away quite quickly as well.
It's snuck in. That's the word we've used.
Peeped in
the article. Yeah, slithered in when
How many more of these can we do?
Yeah, that's the rest of the podcast. Surely it's just silence followed by this. So I think there are a couple of big pieces of news that have driven this in. So HSBC, I think we mentioned this on another podcast. I think we mentioned it in the September report, but it's continuing to be mentioned. So HSBC say like, hey, we've nailed algorithmic trading. There's a lot of investment in the life sciences space, which, by the way, so when I'm cynical about quantum's use with AI, it's because no one can really explain what they would do. It's just like, oh, of course they'll inevitably be beneficial for each other, but no one can say how or why. For life sciences, it's very different. And one of the more compelling pieces of research I saw when looking into quantum was in the life sciences space. And effectively, what they were describing is most people think of drug discovery as so you have this collection of molecules and it solves a problem, but actually the way those molecules react in a human, how they bind to a protein, is millions of different combinations. It can happen in all sorts of different ways. So it doesn't necessarily just glob onto the protein in exactly the same way. It can attach itself in different parts, which can give different results. You might need other molecules for different people. What quantum computing can do is chunter through that in unbelievably complex system very, very quickly. Whereas if you were to use traditional computing, it would take an incredibly long amount of time. And by then, probably the game's changed anyway. It's almost not worth doing. So those type of use cases, I think, are very compelling. And that's what's driving a lot of the positive sentiment, I think. And actually, it's very difficult. If you were to type in quantum computing, there's a new announcement almost every day. And I think outside of the AI buzz, the Magnificent Seven, this is where they're focusing all of their attention. I think this is where they're going. So Google announced a really big experiment that they believe is successful. I'll read out a quote because I'm not even going to try and explain what they've done. But they've demonstrated the first ever verifiable quantum advantage running the out of order time correlator algorithm, which we call Google quantum echoes. So that's what they did, and people were very happy about it. I'm pleased to say, Duncan. People going, oh yeah, this is great. This is the first time anyone's ever done that. And I think there are examples of that all the time.
What's it do? What can it achieve?
So they, in one of the examples, and I don't know how true this is. I mean, do write in if we can be assured of anything. It's that people who do understand quantum do have a habit of writing in and saying, well, it's much more complicated than that. And I've no doubt it is, which is why we caveated the discussion. Yeah, too complicated, in fact. So if you could simplify it, that would be amazing, and you can come on as a guest. But they described it. So if you imagine radar telling you that, hey, there is a ship down at the bottom of the ocean, right? And that's kind of what you can do today. What quantum computing can do, and this is their example, is read the name on the hull of that ship at the same time. So,
okay,
so
that's
incredibly
great.
Detailed, granular view.
That's
whether
great.
or not that's what you would do.
That's great. But my point is, like, what does it do? Not necessarily what does it do, but what does it achieve for you? Like, if you need to know the name of that ship, what's the reason you need to know the name of that ship, and what you can do with that afterwards, right?
And so the name of the ship is theoretical. So that's a theoretical example. I should.
Of course,
suggest.
it's a theoretical example.
Doing that, I don't think that's a use case at all.
No.
But it's like if you were to imagine.
But I'm taking that analogy and expanding on it, right? Like it's cool, I can read the name of the ship, but what do I do with that afterwards? Cool, I can design this new drug, but I gotta build it now, and I've got to do all these other things. So quantum is always, to me, it's always only kind of part the story. We need to know more about its applications to real life and drug discovery, and how that impacts other things, and how, what it costs, and how applicable it is, because there seems to be an obsession today with developing this technology and saying, hey, look at how astonishingly astounding this is, and then not really knowing what to do with it. It goes for AI, it goes for spatial computing. I think the same goes for quantum computing, and I'm more than willing to be proven wrong on this, but the use cases seem remarkably narrow for the amount of investment and the amount of money that quantum computing does and will cost. So I'd like to explore that further, and I've got a basic understanding of how quantum computing works and what it can do, and qubits and superpositions and stuff like that. But my thing is just like, well, how how is that going to be applicable to modern business, modern life, solve the problems that we need to solve? And I'm sure there are people who have interesting things to say about that. I'd just like to talk to them about it. So if you want to come on the show and have a chat, that would be great.
Yeah, and you have to actually know what you're talking about, unlike us. That's it's our show. We get to act like this. You have to come on with a CV. One thing we haven't mentioned, which is really important, is in September we predicted that it would move into the momentum zone by Horizon scanning the news in this tool, and it has.
Yeah,
it has. We were right. I mean, it's probably one of the first bets we've made that's panned out. But
so tell me, bet me, Ollie, where do you think it's going to be next month?
I think it's gonna become more firmly in the momentum zone.
Okay.
And that's for a couple of reasons. So a lot of investment, people feel seemingly that quantum is a place to invest now that AI feels bubbly, right? So there's huge amounts of dollars flowing into it, and that's part of that feeds the narrative for both builder conviction and momentum often. So the investment use case, but also there just seems to be a lot of news coming out about it. So all of, like I said, the Magnificent Seven, all of the big tech guys have a function that's exploring quantum and are constantly trying to outdo each other in a way that perhaps they're not quite able to do now with AI, right? I think you've made a point before where iterative improvement is the name of the day right now, rather than revolutionary improvement in AI. Whereas in quantum, it feels revolutionary. So I think there'll be more good news over the next month that'll make it nudge higher into the momentum zone.
Okay, well, let's see. Put some money on it.
No, well, you're taking that action, are you? You have to give me a counter. Where do you think it's going to be?
No, I didn't. I just asked you the question.
Risk.
Yeah. I'm not. I mean, I should, because that's the name of our podcast. But I reckon I actually think it might fall a little bit into the hype trap.
Oh my God. Oh, there we go. Okay, so there's money on the table. I also like the idea that from this point onwards, we do this where I take a bet and you go, like, well, I won't be forced into making a bet on it. I won't be forced into being long.
I just realised the name of our podcast and the whole format kind of relies on it. So I'm going to say it's going to move into the hype trap. But that's because that's where I think it should be. So we'll see. I think just towards the end of the show, what we're going to do is have a look at the discover area and look at some of the themes and maybe pick out some of the interesting themes that are rising or bubbling up or are new. I'm going to choose. There's a thing about video game industry trends. We're both fond of video games. We've done an episode on gaming before, and I think we should do another one. But there's it's rising in trend and it's quite high in sentiment. So I think people get excited when they talk about video games. But one story here particularly interests me, which is 72% of game developers say Steam is effectively a PC gaming monopoly, and studios say they can't afford to quit Steam. What I think is interesting about this is that if this was another company, there would be a lot of negative sentiment around Steam having a monopoly. But Steam is notoriously kind of pro-consumer. It does a good job. And it's got a monopoly because it's good. And a few people have tried. So Amazon has tried to release its own kind of gaming platform. Epic Games with the Epic Games Store and platform. And they've all just not done very well because Steam is so good. And it's not because it's pricing the competition out. Epic famously gives away a free PC game every month. Steam doesn't do that. It's just because they treat their customers really quite well. Like, customer support is good. They've got regional pricing. And generally, I think public sentiments towards Steam and Gabe Newell is really positive because it's not owned by shareholders and it's quite pro-consumer. So
I would, because this touched on another podcast that we did on open source, but a big part of there, and again, I guess it is being more consumer focused, is Workshop. So they've made it very easy for you to install mods and to install new content from the community. You can't really get anywhere else. And that makes it almost the only place, the only destination to go to. And it'd be very difficult to move that community somewhere else. Let's say Epic Games did do it. Like I said, they've been trying to win people through, and they do a lot of, there are a lot of games where it's like, oh, you can only get this on Epic Games. You have to come over here. I can't imagine what would have to happen for Steam's community of modders, which is, again, as we've discussed, quite a significant part of the value proposition, to move somewhere else. You do have other ways. There are other ways of installing mods, but the hey, subscribe, now it works part of Steam is unrivaled anywhere else. You have to do some real, in a lot of cases, go to Nexus Mods or something like that and install them. It's hassle. It's a lot of work.
I'm just going to mention one more theme from the Discover charts that you might not necessarily see on the ticker at the bottom of this screen or on our website right now, but we'll think about a way to get it in there, which is themes that aren't being spoken about anymore after they were quite high. And the top one of those is AI-powered browsers. So OpenAI released Atlas, Perplexity released Comet, which and I think Edge and Chrome are getting various AI features, and they were a hot topic for a little while. And now people have stopped talking about them. There's less discussion. There's fewer news stories. And I think that's just indicative that these things haven't really taken off. I think I wrote something a little while ago about how these new AI-powered browsers are going to need to do something extremely special to displace Chrome from people's computers, just because of the inertia from changing browsers is quite high. And I think that's just come to the fore. They're not really doing anything special yet, and that's a shame. So it's just another case of AI overpromising and under-delivering to a certain extent. So I'd like to see them do more and be more agentic, but right now they're frankly just wrappers for the tools that already exist on the platforms you can get to from any other browser.
So if I were just to ask, what would as you as a consumer, right? So put your consumer head on and not your Duncan tech expert head on. What would the new AI powered browser need to do to woo you over?
Good question. That's a difficult one. They do the things like do your shopping for you. So go to Morrison's and or any other supermarket. Others are available, and buy my weekly shop. That's great, but I don't actually do my weekly shop on a browser. I use a browser to browse. I use apps to do specific things, and I think that browsers, potentially for me, browsers are the wrong battleground. I think that it's being able to do something through an everything app and take action is not something you want to do necessarily through a browser, because if I'm in a browser, I'm making a conscious decision to go and look at something. Whereas if I'm using an app or speaking to a smart assistant or whatever on my phone, then it's probably more transactional. And I think it's that transactional stuff that these companies need to go after to really kind of attack that agentic workflow that can be powerful for consumers. So I've always said I think AI-powered browsers are a bridge or part of the journey, not the end destination. Whether they're the right bridge, I don't know, and I'm unconvinced about.
Because for me, I think I'm on the same. I mean, I'm less likely to use new technology between us. I think our audience knows that by now, and we certainly know it off each other. A lot of the use cases for it, I just don't like. So it's your example of it doing your shopping for you. If you did do online shopping, you logged into, and I'll name another supermarket, Tesco, even more available. It does that for you anyway. Just like, well, you order these things all the time. Here are your standards. Here's a couple of things on offer. Like the gap between what I have now and what that could give me doesn't feel worthwhile. But if it were to, I don't know, sort out an issue with a government department on my behalf, like the land registry, something really complex, then of course I'd go straight over to it, no problem whatsoever. But it just doesn't seem like we're there yet, where coaxing people into it feels like a less intuitive search experience. I guess a less organic search experience by design. But the fact that I can go and Google stuff and I want to know what the Roman Empire did in a certain period, and I end up bouncing around a little bit. That's where most people start their journey. Whether or not you would have an AI buddy do that for you.
For me, it's about convenience in doing when I'm doing other things, if that makes sense. So if I'm, I had a problem with my dishwasher over the weekend, and I used Gemini to kind of identify a part that had come loose and direct me to a YouTube video on how to put it back in, and that was massively helpful.
That's so Duncan. That is so Duncan.
It was really helpful.
I would have sulked for an hour. I would have punched the machine. I would have dragged it into the street.
And then what? Called a plumber.
I've just been washing my dishes the whole time, just myself. But I need you anyway, dishwasher. You're always a disappointment to me.
But it's just, I think it's like I say, it's about the intent of the user. And I think if you sit down to browse something on a computer, or if you're browsing something on your phone, I just don't think the intent is there that agentic AI will make it that much better. I think it's more of a spur of the moment interaction that will help you to at least initially, that will help you to do the things that you want to do. And I wonder where that comes from best. Probably through the voice assistants, probably through whatever hardware that OpenAI and Johnny Ive are working on. But I know that Google Home has now upgraded to Gemini, so it'd be interesting to test that out and see how it goes, because I think that's really where the advantages of it will come, is talking to it and asking it to do things, connected things that you couldn't necessarily do on a browser, like turn my lights off and also order me some dishwasher tablets. Those two things that if you were to do in a browser, you'd need to go to a few different places. But from an agentic point of view, I mean, it's a terrible example, but those disconnected tasks that in your head are all connected, but you'd need to go to disconnected platforms to achieve. That's where I think the power comes from.
Right. And the reason this is important is because at an economic level, the only way I think, or I guess we think, and many people think, the big AI company is going to make any money is where they're structurally embedded in how we do things like, consume commerce generally, payment infrastructure. Because if the core market is you spending £50 for Gemini for the occasional time when you need it to help you fix a dishwasher, you're probably not going to get the value out of it where you'll continue that subscription indefinitely. If once a month your dishwasher breaks down, that's the only time you use it. But also the mass market appeal probably isn't there either.
No.
So I like the idea that you'd then be able to use that to recoup trillions in investment in data centers to power that capability seems quite fanciful. Whereas if it is a regular contributor to your consumption habits and takes a 1% or 2% cut from that, then the numbers do start to add up. So the shift, avoid getting that inertia problem out of the way is quite important.
Yeah, I use it all the time, right? I speak to these AI assistants and I tinker with them, but I also I don't have like a parasocial relationship with them where I feel like they're a partner or anything like that yet, but I do.
You're in the friendship zone.
Yeah, exactly. I do ask it questions a lot, and I do find value in it. But I pay my subscriptions, and I don't know if I would pay more. I don't think I would, because I have the option to pay more. I have the option to pay £200 a month, but I don't. I think I'm kind of at the right level of payment for me for what I use it for. So it's got to take a marked improvement in what it can do. I'd love to see that happen. I think that would be massively valuable, but it's got to work. It's got to be trustworthy, and it's got to be like integrated. And I think we're a way off that yet.
Yeah, fair enough.
All right. Good technology tracker debate, as always. I think we're going to try and find some guests to explain quantum to us in more detail, or at least what its benefits are and its use cases are, so that we can have a good old debate on that. But I'm sure there'll be some more stuff that we want to talk about coming up. But thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. As ever, go to our website, shortfuseresearch.com, or send us an email, have a chat.
A pleasure as always. You're like, oh, he's the brisk one.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Cheerio.